Hello everyone and welcome back to my kitchen. Today I'm going to show you how to prepare this super easy masa recipe for your holiday tamales. This is my favorite go-to masa when I prepare meatless tamales. And it's so simple to prepare, it's going to become one of your favorite too. But before we get started with the recipe, we're going to start by soaking the corn husks in hot water, because we cannot prepare masa without having to prepare some delicious tamales. So we're going to prepare some tamales with rajas and potatoes and refried beans. Soak the corn husks in very hot water and place a large heavy object over the corn husks so the corn husks can be completely submerged in the water. And let them soak in the hot water for about an hour or until they're ready to use. Next, we're going to prepare the refried filling for the tamales. When I prepare refried beans, I always use manteca because they taste better when you use manteca. You can also use the fat rendered from bacon or vegetable oil. Once the manteca is nice and hot, we're going to add 2 chopped Roma tomatoes, 3 to 4 chopped jalapenos, or less depending on your level of spice, half a white onion, and 3 to 4 garlic cloves finely minced. Season with salt and pepper to your taste, and saute over medium heat for about 5 minutes or until the tomato is nice and weathered. Then we're going to season with 2 tablespoons of New Mexico chili powder. We're going to mix it in, and then we're going to add in the refried beans. For this recipe, I'm going to use 1 30-ounce can of refried beans. I don't always use canned refried beans, but last night I completely forgot to cook my beans. So instead of putting off this recipe any longer, I ran to the store and got myself a can of refried beans. Every once in a while, it's okay to cheat. And with all the extra ingredients that we're adding, nobody's going to notice that these beans come from a can. If you're using canned refried beans, add 2 cups of chicken broth or water or as needed until it has a nice thick consistency. Simmer all these ingredients over low-medium heat for about 8 to 10 minutes or until it has a nice thick consistency like this. As you're cooking your beans, taste them to see if they need additional salt or seasoning. In my case, I am going to add 1 tablespoon of chicken bouillon to add more flavor to the beans. The longer you simmer the beans, the thicker the consistency. Once it reaches your level of consistency, turn off the burner and cover until they're ready to use. In a separate pan, we're going to prepare the rajas with papas. We're going to start by melting 2 to 3 tablespoons of manteca. Then we're going to add half a white onion roughly chopped and 2 garlic cloves finely minced. Saute for about a minute, then add 4 Roma tomatoes roughly chopped and about 6 to 8 jalapenos, cut into strips. Season with salt and pepper to your taste. Saute for about 3 to 4 minutes or until the tomatoes are lightly withered. Then we're going to season with 2 tablespoons of chili powder and half a teaspoon of Mexican oregano. Mix in the seasonings, then add 2 large potatoes cut into strips. Mix in the potatoes and season with 1 tablespoon of chicken bouillon. Continue to simmer for an additional 5 minutes, then turn off the burner and cover until they're ready to use. The potatoes are not going to be completely cooked, but that is perfectly fine because they'll continue to cook once we add them to the tamales. To prepare the masa, we're going to need 2 cups of manteca. This is manteca that I purchased in the store at Cardenas Market. You can also prepare your own manteca at home when you prepare chicharrones, but that recipe is in a different video. You can find the link to that video in the description of this video. Add the manteca to a medium stock pot and turn on the burner to low-medium heat so the manteca can begin to melt. Normally when I prepare tamales, I like to use some of the sauce to add to the masa to give it some color. But since we're preparing meatless tamales, I'm going to use chili powder to add color and flavor to the masa. You can use any type of chili powder that you prefer. You can use this brand, but I personally like to use the New Mexico chili powder because it comes in different heat levels. You can use the green one if you don't want it too spicy, or you can use the red one if you want them a little bit extra spicy, which is the one I'm going to use. The manteca is almost completely melted. I'm just going to give it a light stir, and then I'm going to add 4 tablespoons of New Mexico chili powder. Mix in the chili powder to incorporate with the manteca. Then add 6 cups of chicken broth, vegetable broth, or water. I'm also going to add 2 tablespoons of chicken bouillon to add more seasoning to the broth. Keep in mind that this is the broth that we're going to use for the masa, so you want it to be well seasoned. But don't go overboard on the salt or the chicken bouillon. If we need to add more salt, we can always add more when we're preparing the masa. Leave it on the burner long enough to where it's nice and warm. You don't want it to be too hot, otherwise it's going to burn your hands if you're mixing by hand, or it's going to cook your masa. If it does get a little bit too hot, allow it to cool down before adding the masa. Before we get started with the preparation of the masa, we're going to remove the corn husks from the water and we're going to place them in a strainer so the excess water can drain off and they can begin to dry. When preparing tamales, I like to use the Manteca brand, the one that has tamale on the packaging. We're going to start by adding the broth from the stock pot into the bowl. We're also going to add about 2 to 3 tablespoons of baking powder and 1 teaspoon of baking soda. Mix these ingredients with the broth before we begin to add the masa. As you can see, the broth is starting to bubble up. The combination of the baking powder and the baking soda will result in fluffier tamales. Now we're going to begin to add the masa a little bit at a time. Before adding more masa, make sure that the masa is completely incorporated with the broth. With the amount of broth and manteca that we used, we ended up using about half of the bag, which is about 2 pounds, which equals to about 8 cups of masa. The total mixing time that I took to mix this masa was about 15 minutes. And the results were almost identical when I spent 30 to 40 minutes mixing the masa. Once your masa has a nice thick consistency like this and it's not sticking to the spoon, it's time to prepare some tamales. When preparing your tamales, you want to spread the masa on the smoother side of the hoja. Spread about 2 tablespoons of the masa right in the middle of the hoja. Add a couple pieces of the potatoes, some of the tomato with the rajas, and a couple slices of cheese. I'm using a combination of queso manchego and queso Oaxaca, but you can use any other type of melting cheese of your choice. And look at the masa, it does not stick to the hoja at all. Now we're going to close it up and then we're going to wrap it in wax paper. By wrapping them in wax paper, they cook a lot faster, and it also avoids a mess in the steamer when cooking. Add a little bit of water to the flap and close it shut. Add a little bit of water to the flap to hold it together. Once we have a few prepared, we're going to arrange them in the steamer and we're going to place a ball of aluminum foil in the middle so they don't fall over as they're cooking. Then we're going to place the corn husks that were too small to use over the tamales. And we're going to steam them for about an hour to an hour and a half. When removing them from the steamer, allow them to cool down for about 10 minutes before unwrapping them. And these are the results. These tamalitos came out so delicious that you will not miss the meat in the tamales. Since the meat is so expensive right now, it's a great option for your holiday tamales. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you're new to this channel, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to our channel. And make sure to hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on future recipes like this one. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in our next video with a different recipe.